Welcome to the Relaunch Your Career podcast. I am your host, Leah Lambart, career and interview coach and founder of Relaunch Me, where we help you find the work that you were meant to do. In today's episode, I'm joined by my colleague and friend, Emily Manley, who is one of our career coaches at Relaunch Me. So Em and I have put together a bit of a collection of some of the questions that we've received both from some listeners and also some clients over the last couple of weeks. And we thought that responding to those in this forum might be helpful to lots of other people out there. So just a reminder that if you do have any career-related questions that you would like us to answer on the podcast, please email me at leah@relaunchme.com.au. So enough of the formalities. Welcome to the podcast, Em.
Thanks, Leah. It's good to be here. Breaks up the week a bit.
Yes, so it is Friday afternoon. We've both finished our homeschooling duties for the week. How was your week?
Oh gosh, it's an interesting question at the moment, that one, isn't it? I wish I could say the answer was fabulous, but it was okay. We survived. We made it through, and I think at the moment, that's a feat anyway in itself.
How many meltdowns in your house today?
Oh gosh, if we count them over the week, it'd be double figures, I'd say. But no, look, overall they've coped well, but it's the most intense job I've ever had, I think, this homeschooling plus work juggle.
Yeah, I think we've just got to have fairly low expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. It's easier said than done sometimes, but I think you're right. It's just achieving what you can and being kind to yourself, I think, just not putting the pressure on yourself.
That's right. And look, I think a lot of people are struggling with, being at home and working remotely, whether they have kids or not. So, which is probably actually quite a nice lead into one of my questions, Em, that I've got for you from Kay. And she says, I'm really struggling managing staff whilst working remotely. Do you have any tips? Do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, sure. Look, that's something that I've talked to a lot of people about over the last little while, and I think it's definitely harder this time around. People are feeling, that external environment a lot more than they were first time around. So I think it's difficult when you are trying to manage kind of your own emotional state and mental health and then keep a pulse or a read on your team as well. So the first thing I'd say to Kate is just check in with herself. What is she feeling at the moment? Is she feeling, equipped, I suppose, in her role as a manager or leader, to be able to kind of, take care of her team? Because if she's not looking after herself first, it's going to be very difficult to do that. So I would suggest first just doing a bit of a kind of assessment of what her, self-care looks like at the moment. I think that's a really big one. So she needs to, I guess the leader set the tone rather for the rest of the team. So if she's depleted, then that will kind of funnel down to the rest of her team. Make sure that she's, being kind to herself, and that self-compassion piece I think is huge at the moment for everybody. If you feel like you need to have a little afternoon off or a little snooze, or just not attend 400 meetings in the day, try and put some of those off. So that would be the first thing. And then when she's feeling like she's in a position where she feels confident and strong enough to, to effectively lead a team, then it's actually thinking about, well, what do they need in terms of that level of communication? In the first lockdown, I think there was a lot of have to check in 4 times a day with everybody and make sure everyone's good. This time, I think people have started to realise, how they work best and how that communication piece looks for them, and it is quite individual. So I'd be checking in with my team and just saying, look, what do you want? Do you prefer email? Do you prefer me to check in first thing? I think just being a little bit flexible around that, and flexible around how people might want to, fix their hours, and kind of let them own and drive that. And you've got to have trust in your team to be able to do that. So I think it's if she doesn't have a huge team, obviously, it's much easier to do that, to be quite individual in thinking about how people like to work and just trying to accommodate that where she can, encouraging them to take some time out for themselves, whether that just be putting time in their calendars for, a forced kind of break or lunch break, encouraging things like walking meetings, so she can go out for a walk and then put her AirPods in and do a meeting while she's outside walking. which will benefit her, but she could also encourage her team to do the same thing. So it all comes down to kind of that role modelling. So that'd be some initial tips for Kay. The communication is obviously a huge one, and the wellbeing at the moment, I think, is where the focus needs to be.
There's some great tips there. And I mean, it all comes down to personality, doesn't it? Some people are, that I talk to, actually absolutely loving working from home and having some time to them, a little bit more time to themselves and less perhaps meetings, and where others are really struggling and finding that they're completely de-energized.
For sure. And that's why I think, it is important just to individually check in and ask the question, just seek feedback. What's working, what's not? What can we change? How can I better support you?
Great. Well, let me move on to another one. I've got another one for you, Em, from Carmel. I hate my job, but I feel like I should be grateful to have a job right now. I feel sick about having to stick it out here. I know that this is not where I should be. What should I do?
Oh, that's an awful situation. And I know you and I have both been there. It's hard, but, there is a way through it. So the first thing I say, if you're feeling sick about having to stick it out, then that is a pretty massive red flag that perhaps the role isn't quite suited to you. I think it'd be important for Carmel to actually sit down and spend some time thinking about what aspects of her job does she actually enjoy, if any. And what aspects does she find hard, or does she really not enjoy? It sounds like there's quite a few of those. And, you can quickly see, whether it's weighing in the wrong direction. And then to think about, well, with the stuff that I do really enjoy about the role, could I kind of increase that and decrease the things I'm not enjoying? So can I kind of pivot somewhat so that I am doing a bit more of what I'm enjoying and about this role or career, and doing less of what I don't enjoy? That may or may not be possible. If it's not possible, I think then she needs to probably think about taking steps towards a change. And that doesn't mean it has to happen today, tomorrow, next week, next month even. Once you kind of, your mindset shifts from feeling stuck in a job to, okay, I'm on track to make a change, it's amazing how even that can make you feel differently about your role. So even if you're not enjoying it, but you're taking steps towards something else, that can kind of make it more bearable to stay where you are. So then I think she just would need to, just assess, well, what are my strengths? Potentially get some coaching around that, and what her values are, and how she could leverage her strengths into some other career or role. Yes, she's right about being grateful to have a job at the moment. It may not be the perfect time, but there are still things that she can do behind the scenes just to do that personal assessment.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I think whether you leave a job that you hate at the moment, it often depends a little bit on your financial status and commitments, because I think leaving a job right now, depending on, I guess, your experience and what you want to do next, you probably might need to be prepared to be out of work for a little while. And so I guess something I would add to what you've already mentioned is perhaps she could look at sort of building a little side hustle and doing something in her hours outside of work, depending on her time and whether she's also homeschooling, which would mean she probably wouldn't have the time. But could she be looking at doing something that is more fun, more energizing, more aligned to her values, perhaps outside of her working hours, that she can be, really look forward to and be energized by?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. As you would know, we come across a lot of people who do that whilst they're not thrilled by their day job, but they might have something else that's more of a passion, whether it be, making jewelry or gardening or whatever it might be, which, kind of balances out that dissatisfaction. But it does sound like Carmel, they're kind of strong words that she feels sick about staying in the job. So I think that definitely signals some kind of action needs to be taken.
Yeah, and look, whilst we're on that, I'm going to put another question to you, Em. I've lost my job, and this one is from Sam. I've lost my job, and I'm worried that I won't find another job in my field as it has been greatly affected since COVID. Should I go back and study? What would you say to that?
Look, it's hard not knowing a little bit more about what she might want to go and study, and how much she has considered that particular avenue. I would say she would need to think quite carefully about study and just make sure that she's done her due diligence, I guess, and research around the particular course and what the employment outcomes are once she finishes the study. I would be getting on the website and just checking out the curriculum of the course, going into the subjects and checking out what's involved in the study, and make sure that all kind of piques her interest and excites her. Speak to people who've done the course, or do research on LinkedIn, people who have done that course, and see what kind of employment outcomes they've reached. So it can be, times like this, it can be a good time to study. But I think it's just making sure that it's a really considered, informed decision, rather than kind of just a spontaneous or knee-jerk sort of, reaction to a situation where there's an opportunity, you've got time and you've got space to do it, but make sure it's the right thing.
And I think if you were thinking of studying anyhow, yes, it is probably, I've been talking to a couple of university graduates who are thinking about doing honours, but we're thinking of perhaps delaying that for a year and trying to get a job for the next 12 months. In their situation, I would probably just say go back and do your honours year now, and hopefully by the time you finish, things will have started to improve a little bit.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. That's good advice.
But it's understanding what those career outcomes are at the end, and not just doing a course for the sake of it, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. Like you do need to be careful, and you don't really know until you've spoken to people, as much research as you like. But I think that talking to people piece is just so important and significant in terms of your research. And you just want to make sure you can get a job at the end.
Okay. So, Em, do you have any questions at your end?
Yeah, I do. I've noted a few down here that I've received over the past few weeks. So I think this is a good one for you, Leah. This is from Peter. I don't feel that I'm well suited to my current job. How do I work out what I am passionate about?
So I find a lot of clients, when they come to us, say, look, I don't know what I'm passionate about. I'm hoping you can tell me. The first thing I would say is, if you're passionate about something, you usually know about it already. I don't think going to see a career coach is going to make you realise what you're passionate about. The second thing I would say is that to find a job that you love, you don't necessarily have to be passionate about it, but I do think you have to be interested in it and you have to feel energised by it. But you don't necessarily have to have this undying passion for what you do. And often I find that sometimes people who have gone into a career because they're passionate, I'm just thinking of an example of a guy that I met recently who was in his early 30s who became a mechanic because he loved cars. Like, he just absolutely loved motor racing, etc. And so he chose to become a mechanic. But over the years, his interest in cars has waned and he actually doesn't enjoy his job at all. And so I guess that passion perhaps led him into a path that he might have been interested in for a while, but unfortunately it's sort of died off and now he's actually quite unhappy. So I think, you don't have to be passionate to find a good job. The next step would be, obviously, like you were mentioning before, do some self-assessment. What type of things are you interested in? What comes naturally to you? What energizes you? And sometimes it's, what sort of conversations do you enjoy? When you go into a bookshop, what section of the bookshop are you drawn to? Yeah. So even some of those conversations or those questions can give you some answers in terms of work that you perhaps would be better suited to.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think you're right about the passion bit. I think it has to be meaningful to you in some way, but I agree it doesn't need to be your passion. I mean, I know a lot of people who are passionate football supporters or music lovers, but doesn't necessarily mean they need to go and work in football, and most of them wouldn't have the talent to be able to work as a musician. So your passions are important, but they don't need to, be a career as well.
Exactly. Well, we'd both probably be working in the wine industry.
You're not wrong.
Especially at the moment.
Yeah, that's right. So, Leah, I've got another one for you. Okay, so this one is from Patricia. I don't feel like I fit into my current workplace. I've been so much happier working from home and I'm dreading the day when things return to normal. What should I do?
That's funny. I've had the same conversation with quite a few clients the last couple of weeks. And I think it's a lot of the introverts are really enjoying working from home. So, look, I I honestly believe the work environment is such an important factor when it comes to choosing the right career. And again, as you and I both know, we've worked in work environments which were just not the right fit for us. So I think the first thing is, when you choose a career in the first place, ideally you want to have done that research to get a really good sense of what actually happens behind the scenes. So, for instance, if you are an extrovert and you get your energy from being around people, you need to find out whether the jobs you're interested in will actually allow you to use your sort of outgoing personality and meet new people, or will you be stuck behind the scenes sitting at a desk all day working on your own? In which case, you may find it actually quite de-energizing. So I think, the first thing is having a really good think about or understanding of what your personality type is, and as a result, what type of work environment you're best suited to. So are you an introvert? Are you an extrovert? Do you want to work in an environment that's really process driven, where you're following instructions and procedures? Or are you someone who's really creative and wants to work in an environment where you can use your imagination and come up with ideas? So look, there's a lot of factors in there. I think a lot of people who are enjoying working from home are often people who are introverts. They're really happy working independently and working on a task without interruptions, and they're really relishing in this time. So perhaps Patricia, she could even think about having a conversation with her manager to see what the options are for her to work from home, even when things do return to normal. I do think a lot of companies are going to be much more open to having their staff working from home. And as you've probably seen in the news, some companies like Atlassian, they've actually decided that everyone is going to work from home going forward. So I think that's going to be much more of the norm. So hopefully Patricia can perhaps come to some arrangement with her manager and use this time working from home to prove that she can still deliver the same results and some great outcomes without being in the office.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. And I've got one here from Steve, Leah, and this is a LinkedIn question. I'm quite a private person. Do I really need a LinkedIn profile?
Look, I appreciate that not everyone likes social media and likes, a lot of people do really value their privacy. At the same time, I think you've got to balance up what your objective for being on LinkedIn is. If you are someone who is job searching and perhaps more in the sort of corporate space, then I really think it's a must-have. If you are someone who works in retail or hospitality and your ideal employer isn't actually on LinkedIn, then I think it's not as necessary. If you're a freelancer or a contractor or have your own business, then, again, it's a must-have. There's a number of reasons why LinkedIn is useful, and it's not just for networking. The way that I use it the most is for research and working with clients to show them how you can find out information to help you make really good career decisions, and how you can find people who can help you. So it's, great for research. I also think it's kind of expected. So when you send a resume to a recruiter, that one of the first things they will do is look you up on LinkedIn. Some industries, I think it's kind of a little bit strange if you're not on LinkedIn, or the recruiters might think that. So look, Steve, I would, depending on your industry and the role that you're trying to achieve, or the career path you're trying to achieve, I would strongly consider it. And you can really control how much information is seen by other people. So there are some really good privacy settings that you can adjust to your needs. So I hope that answers the question for you, Steve.
I think that's really good, Leah. I often get the question, I'm not, or the statement, I'm just not a networker. It's just not me. And the people feel really intimidated by the thought, or daunted by the thought of having to go out and network. And so what I would say to that is, I think it's uncomfortable for everybody when they start out, unless you're a super extrovert and you've been in sales or something like that and it's sort of second nature. But for anybody else, it is intimidating and it is daunting. And I think, like anything, it's just a matter of practice. And, once you've had the opportunity to reach out to a few people, the more you do it, obviously, the more confident you get. It's like any skill that you're trying to hone, I think just repetition. And then the more you do it, the more confident you'll become with it. And you'll start to realise pretty quickly that generally people are open to helping, and everybody does it. So, it's not something that only desperados do. I think there's this kind of, stigma with networking and reaching out to people that you don't know on LinkedIn. But actually it is a really acceptable way now of contacting people.
And I would say most people do accept your request, but I still think it's important to perhaps send a little note as to why you're connecting. I do find that it's a little bit odd when people just connect and there's no, you have no understanding as to why they might be connecting. If you can send a little personal note to say that you have been following them and you're interested in what they've been posting, or, something that you're in the same industry, then I think then they're obviously much more likely to accept your invitation. It's funny, I think I've only had one knockback. So I actually contacted a lady who I was thinking of getting to engage me. I was thinking of engaging her to help me with something. I think it was for my website or something like that, something that she was offering. And so I sent her a LinkedIn request, and she wrote back and said that she couldn't accept my request because she was nearly at her limit for connections, which I didn't even know was a thing. Anyhow, it turned out I looked it up to see, well, how many connections you can have, and the limit is 30,000 or something. Whoa. So I obviously was not in her top 30,000, which pretty funny, I thought.
It's not you, it's me. I think we've got one final question here, actually. Let me just have a look. This one's from Jessica. I've been on a career break for a year after having my second child before COVID, planning to start looking to return to work. However, I'm homeschooling kids. I just don't have time to look, and recruiters won't look at me because I've got this enormous gap on my CV. I think that's always an issue for mums wanting to return, isn't it? Addressing that gap on their resume. So she's just said, can you help with that?
Well, look, I think the positive from COVID, if there is a positive, is that the gap isn't going to be such a thing anymore. I think so many people are going to have a gap on their resume that recruiters may not even question it like they have in the past. I think often the gap is more of a hurdle for the candidate than the recruiter in some cases. So I guess the most important thing would be to be able to explain what you've been doing during your career break, to be able to talk about it in a positive way and talk about what experiences you've gained and what skills you've developed, whether it's through volunteering at the local kinder, if it's, doing some webinars on LinkedIn to keep up to date, being involved in LinkedIn to keep in contact with people in the industry, some online courses. There's so many things that you could perhaps talk about, in terms of the things that you've done during that break. But look, I really feel for people, and I've got a few friends as well and clients who were expecting to be, this was their year, they were going to get back into work, and then obviously COVID hit us and they feel like they've almost had to delay that even 12 months. So I do feel for her. Is there anything you would add, Em?
I think that's all really good advice, and the only thing I'd add is I think often it does come down to confidence, and again, confidence can just hold us back so much. So I think just doing some things that will help to increase your confidence, and like you mentioned, whether that is doing some kind of short course online or even just, getting amongst some like-minded people and fleshing out some ideas, just finding your tribe of supportive kind of mums, fellow mums who have had success stories. I think being around people who've been successful can inspire you. Lots of people are willing to help you, so reaching out to people who might be able to help with just personal brand rather. I think just working on that side of things and just remembering all the skills that you hone in motherhood as well. There's so many out there that I just don't think are recognised enough when we go to interviews as returning to work mums, that we are completely different people than when we left that workplace or left to go and have a child. So just important to remind yourself of that.
Yeah, look, I think you can start small, can't you? Like even just learning something really small. I know when I learn something new, it builds my confidence, even if it's quite a small thing. It might be using some new tech or something for the podcast. And I think I get a real sense of achievement knowing that I've added some new skill to my my repertoire. So look, Em, I think I'm out of questions as well. But look, I hope that's been helpful to our listeners, and we're really keen to do some more Q&A type style podcast interviews like this. So, as I said, please email me any questions. It's leah@relaunchme.com.au. If you've got any specific questions for Em from things that she's talked about today, you can also email her direct at emily@relaunchme.com.au. So look, Em, it's great to chat with you. Thanks for sharing your insights. Have a nice weekend. Not that it's very exciting these days.
No, not at all. But look, I mean, there are similarities, I suppose, aren't there, to being incarcerated? We probably shouldn't we shouldn't compare to being in jail, but that's what it feels like sometimes. We'll get our 1 hour of exercise out in the yard. And that will be the highlight of the weekend. I think it's going to be pretty horrible weather, so it won't be too bad isolating this weekend. What about you?
Not very much. Walking the dog is probably the highlight at the moment, and doing a bit of cooking with my daughter, and my eldest has just discovered online shopping, so COVID might end up being quite an expensive time for us.
Look out. Well, thanks for having me, Leah. It was great to chat, and enjoy your ISO weekend.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Same to you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Relaunch Your Career. If you did, please subscribe, share with your friends, leave a review, or connect with us on social media at Relaunch Me Career Consulting. If you have any questions about the episode or the work that we do, then contact us via the website relaunchme.com.au. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.